So he continues with Shem Ameira Midas Malchus Baruch. What is the name which indicates on the Midah of Malchus of HaKadosh Baruch Hu? That's the Shem Adnos. So we have a Shem Avaya and the Shem Aleph Dalet Nun Yud, which is about Adnos, domination. Adnos is in the context of Adoin Kol Ha'oretz. He brings it over to you, Adoin Kol Ha'oretz. He's master over the Oretz, because only from the Shem of Adnos can you have an Oretz. From the perspective of Shem Avaya, there is no Oretz. So that's embedded in Malchus, in the Shem, in Adnos. So what do we infer from here? This very name of Malchus, this very rather midah of Malchus, this character of Malchus of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, this attribute of Malchus of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, this is what brings existence, and this is what creates the whole phenomenon of Olam, the world, the way the world appears at this time. As a Yesh Gamor V'Davar Mifnei Atzmei, as a separate entity, and in other words, demonstrating its own Yeshus, that here I am, it's about me, and Davar Mifnei Atzmei is a separate entity on its own. A world which is Eini Batal B'Mitzias Mamash, a world which is not completely annulled to the true Emes Hashem in its appearance, in its presentation, in its demonstration. So now here there is a bit of a difference, and we can appreciate again this being a midah of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Here there's a difference between a melech and a am. A king doesn't create his nature, his nation. There is a nation, there is a king, and they want to get together and set up this king subject, king nation relationship. And they move forward with this process, and eventually ends up a healthy king. And again, we're talking about a healthy king nation relationship, which is positive, and for that matter, it's embedded in creation. People look for leadership, people want leadership, a nation wants leadership. So again, ultimately in the last generations it unfolded in a different way, democracy, but in the end of the day, it's part of the healthy psyche of a human being that he wants to look up to somebody as a model, or somebody who he could connect to, and somebody more experienced than him. And if it's a wise person, then if it's a teacher, a mentor, in the end of the day, this is something normal. In other words, to the extent that one is always ready to submit himself to a healthy leader. So again, it depends. There are so many different levels. If it's a master, if it's a father, if it's a mentor, if it's a teacher. And obviously the ideal is the melech, the king. When there's a true healthy king, it's a healthy process. It's not just one dominance over the other. The king accepts, the nation accepts the king, and they submit themselves to the king, and they want this king to look after them, and they want Asher Yitzim, Asher Yivim, like it says in the pasuk regarding Yeshua, Moshe Rabbeinu, which was the iconic Yitzim Yivim leader, which again, this is part and parcel of the, not only the way it is by the Jewish nation, but this is part of the makeup of any human being. People seek leadership. So yet the king is a separate entity, the nation is a separate entity. The king didn't create the nation. They would come together to follow this healthy process. But when it comes to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, the Midah Malchus of HaKadosh Baruch Hu created this whole phenomenon of Am, which would be reflective in a world which doesn't demonstrate that automatic subservience to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. That's the cap of Midas HaMalchus. Midas HaMalchus creates an Olam which looks like an Am. Am, in the context of the Gechalim Ayman, is extinguished from the spirit of the king. This is the Midas, this is what Midas HaMalchus accomplishes. As we can all appreciate, it's only because Hashem is a Melech, so there is the phenomenon of time and place. But here, it's with the meaning of Malchus. Alter Rebbe points out, yes, obviously everything comes from HaKadosh Baruch Hu. A king doesn't create a nation. HaKadosh Baruch Hu created this world, created everything. Created the people, created everything. All creations are extension of the Creator, because there's a Creator, there's creations. But here, Alter Rebbe is pointing out the meaning. The world, the way it appears, is a yesh v'davar nifra b'fnei atzmi, is similar to the am. Lashon emim is a product of that midas of malchus. It's part of the cap of malchus. Because of the cap of malchus, you have the production of a world which is an oretz, separate from the spirit of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, and they accept upon themselves the king, which is HaKadosh Baruch Hu, and they becomes a melech Aleihem, starting from Am Yisrael eventually, as it extends to the entire world, and ultimately the world itself will stand in a total state of total submissiveness to the king. But what created this phenomenon, that itself is the midah of Malchus, creates a world which is a yesh gomer v'davar b'fnei atzmi v'eino batel mitzias mamash. And if HaKadosh Baruch Hu would take off that cap, that's right, everything would return into total nothingness. Like we spoke before about the angels and beyond, because the angels still an entity which are able to serve and praise and glorify and so on. But when HaKadosh Baruch Hu would take away that cap, nothing would exist. Everything would be batal. So obviously, Alter Rebbe is primarily talking about this Elam Haza, that it would return to its source in the Dvar Hashem Baruch Pivis Baruch Batal Shem B'Mitzias Mamash. It becomes standing in a complete bittul, similar to the Yichudei Law. We gave the example the other day of the traffic lights. Simple, petty example, but you can appreciate it. They open it up and you see 3 equal bulbs, and they're much brighter than when the cap is on the red or the yellow, whatever, the green. But we're not looking for brightness, we're looking for something with a purpose. So you have the brightness, the streets would be much more bright, especially at night. At day, not really a difference, but nonetheless, you'd see the brightness of the lights, but then there would be chaos, there would be no order on the streets. So you have something covering up, and it camouflages the brightness of the light. Now it goes through a red glass or a green glass or a yellow glass, but there is a purpose that creates a certain or extends a certain message to those who are looking at those lights. So it camouflages, it takes away from the brightness, but it establishes a certain spirit of law and order, which could be followed by the people who are looking at that light. Similarly, but if you open it up, what would happen? It would be brighter, but there would be chaos. Similarly, just to understand this, if HaKadosh Baruch Hu would take off the cap of Malchus, so to us it would be chaos, but in essence it would be the best thing that ever exists. If you think about it, it would have been the best thing. Again, without the purpose of Nisam HaKadosh Baruch Hu, look, what do we need all this? To be consumed to the infinity of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, that should be by definition, that is something inherently good and positive, and maybe exciting. That was the Nadav Avihu, their Klais HaNefesh. We just want to be part of the godly reality, losing ourselves into that godly reality without any entity at all. In other words, to lose the entire entity. The Alter Rebbe speaks about the Nei Hashem Nishmas Adam in the famous chapter Yud Ches. Actually, you could find it. It's a click away. He explains there that this is why the similarity, or namely Yotes, the similarity of the neshama to a ner, because you ask the ner, what are you jumping? Where do you think you're going? You're going to a place which is again the reason why everything gravitates downwards. The fire gravitates upwards because the shadish, the source of fire, is on high, like the Rambam points out, and the fire is looking to be consumed in its source. And you ask the fire, where are you going? Once you become part of your source, you lose your whole entity as a individual flame. And they obviously respond, theoretical, conceptual, natural respond is, I don't care really if I lose my entity as a individual flame. I just want to be part of my source, which is the shadish of Eish, the source of fire. And so too, this is default by every single Yid. But again, we're not talking about the avodah of Klais HaNefesh. We're talking about if Hashem would take away that cap, everything would really return into the energy of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, and nothing would ever be. Batel Sham B'Mitzias Mamash. It would be the whole phenomenon of Eilam. And the reason why there's an Eilam, because Hashem put on that cap of Malchus. So Malchus creates the phenomenon of Am and Oretz and so on, which again, that stark difference between the way it is by a Melech and an Am, despite again a healthy relationship, a good relationship, and this is embedded into the psyche of every human being. But nonetheless, the king does not create the nation. Baruch Hashem created the whole phenomenon. There should be Eilam, Lashon Helam has to concealing the reality of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, creating this image of a world which is Omimot, separate, this extinguished of the fire of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, which comes to the cap of Malchus, again with the energy of Gvura, which covers up over the Malchus, so of the infinity of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, Kaviyachal. And it creates this whole idea of a Yesh V'Davar Nifra B'Fnei Atzmai, and then you could have the process of the Tachtin coming closer to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, submitting themselves to HaKadosh Baruch Hu on their own, by their own initiatives, again, through the tools of what Hashem gave us, which is our holy Torah and holy mitzvahs. But the whole phenomenon just exists because there's the Midah Malchus. Alter Rebbe just concludes over here, what is the Geder of Shem Eilam? When we say Eilam, we spoke about it a few times, that if you want to encapsulate what Eilam is, it's time and place. He says, what is Eilam? Mokim Zman, time and place and time. When we say place, it's Mizrach, Ma'ariv, Tzaf, and Dora, Maila, Mata, which is south, east, west, north, and south, Maila and Mata, top and bottom. That's Mokim, and Zman is over Va'asi, past, present, and future, which doesn't exist over Malchus. Malchus, when there's Malchus, then Hashem Melech, Hashem Molech, Hashem Yimlech. Before that, Haya, Hayve, V'hiya Ke'echad.